A Roman soldier stands in the limestone courtyard of the Praetorium, his calloused hands twisting a branch of long, dark thorns, and hurl them onto a floor that rings like shattering glass. Same symbol, same circle, again and again. The thorns are the physical, tangible manifestation of a broken, dying world. The Roman soldier thinks he is making a joke. He is actually making theology. Jesus takes the curse of the earth. He wears it on his own head. The blood runs into his eyes and drips off his jaw. Pilate drags him out to the balcony. He points to the bleeding man and shouts to the deafening crowd, "Behold the man." This is not a parody of a king. It is the return of the priest. Remember the Nezer, the separation, the consecration, the heavy gold plate pressed against Aaron's sweating forehead in the tabernacle. Jesus stands on the Roman balcony, separated from his people, carrying their guilt, wearing the terrifying physical proof of his sacrifice. The priest has come back to the altar. Only this time, the separation will kill him. He carries the wood. He takes the nails. He breathes his last. The Romans thought the crown of thorns was the end of the narrative. But 2,000 years later, the human heart is still reaching for the wrong kind of metal. You probably do not have a piece of gold sitting on your nightstand. You probably have not conquered a neighboring city. And nobody is laying 75 pounds of solid metal on your head. But we are a species obsessed with our own coronations. Most people assume a crown in the Bible is simply a shorthand for authority. We think of it as a piece of ancient jewelry. We spend our lives secretly chasing the diadema. We want the crown that guarantees control over our environment, over our reputation, and over the unpredictable, terrifying variables of our future. You see it in the frantic way we try to manage the perceptions of everyone around us, hoarding social approval like an ancient king stacking gold in a sealed treasury. You feel it in the quiet, vibrating panic of a Tuesday afternoon, when a single piece of bad news disrupts your carefully planned life, and your chest goes tight because you realize you do not actually sit on the throne. The deep, chronic exhaustion you feel at the end of a week is not a failure of effort. It is the crushing weight of an illegitimate crown. You were never designed to carry the heavy metal of your own sovereignty. We weave our own fragile little wreaths out of job titles, bank balances, and the shifting opinions of people we barely even know. We tie the silk ribbons around our foreheads, build our tiny kingdoms, and then live in constant terror that someone is going to breach the walls and take it all away. God does not offer the diadema to the human heart. He offers the Stephanos. When Jesus speaks to the persecuted church in Smyrna in the book of Revelation, people who are facing imprisonment, starvation, and the absolute loss of all earthly control, he does not promise them a throne in the Roman Senate. He says, "Be faithful unto death, and I will," meant to show who is in charge, who holds the power, who gets to make the rules, and, in the empires of Babylon and Rome, give you the crown of life, the Stephanos of life. If you are burning out, it might be because you are trying to rule a kingdom. Instead of running your race, the monarch sits on a velvet cushion and worries about assassins. The runner strips off every unnecessary weight, feels the cold wind against their face, and pushes through the burning in their calves because they know the agony has a destination. The Stephanos is not a guarantee of a comfortable life. It is the proof that you survived a brutal one. But to understand exactly what Paul and John meant when they promised this specific wreath to first-century believers, you have to step away from the modern marathon and look at what the ancient Greek athletes were actually doing. Because they were not running on a padded track, they were running through a gauntlet. The sand kicks up. The Mediterranean sun beats down on the Isthmus of Corinth. The roar of 40,000 voices shakes the stone seats. A runner breathes in the thick dust. His lungs burn. His calves cramp. His feet slam into the packed earth. He does not wear armor. He does not wear a tunic. He has stripped off every single ounce of fabric. The sweat pours down his back. The salt stings his eyes. He crosses the line. He collapses. The air heaves in and out of his chest. That is exactly what it meant. But if you look closer at the original languages beneath the English translations, at the heavy cost, a judge walks forward. The stadium goes silent. The judge extends his hand and places the Stephanos on the runner's dripping forehead. Look at what the runner receives. It is not gold. It is not silver. It is a braided ring of wild celery or dried pine branches. 10 months of brutal, suffocating training. 10 months of beating his body into submission. 10 months of denying every appetite, refusing wine, pushing his muscles until they tore. All of that agony, all of that blood, for a dead plant that will turn brown and crumble to dust in 5 days. The wreath is not the prize. It is the proof. It is the physical evidence that this man did not quit when his body begged him to stop. A Jewish tent maker stands in the city. He watches the runners. He watches the boxers. He sees the withering pine needles. Paul of Tarsus looks at the Isthmian Games, and he picks up a pen to write to the church, living in the shadow of that exact stadium. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He writes, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable." Paul uses the Stephanos. He points to the bleeding, gasping athletes and tells the early Christians that this is what their faith is supposed to look like. Attached to every single diadem, from Exodus to Revelation, you start to see something the modern reading completely misses. Following Jesus is not a slow walk through a garden. It is a sprint through a gauntlet. It requires the absolute stripping away of every dead weight. It demands the agony of the course. It requires a singular, terrifying focus on the judge, standing at the end. You run, you suffer, you endure, and you receive the wreath. But the race does not last forever. Eventually, the dust settles. The lungs stop burning. The runners step off the track. The Greek stadium shows us how the crown is won on earth. But to see what actually happens to it when the race is finally over, you have to leave the dirt of Corinth. You have to look at the vision given to an old man exiled on a rock in the Aegean Sea. John, the apostle, looks up. The sky tears open. He sees the finish line. And he sees 24 figures doing something absolutely unthinkable with the reward they were given. The book of Revelation is arguably the most misunderstood text in the human library. We often read it as a horror story, a cryptic timeline of future disasters, or a geopolitical puzzle waiting to be decoded. But at its center, it is a liturgy. It is a revelation of who actually holds the power. In the 4th chapter, John looks through an open door and tries to describe the indescribable. The biblical crown is not a trophy of privilege. It is a terrifying marker of sacrifice. We are conditioned to read the crown. He writes about a throne room. He describes a floor stretching out like a sea of glass, clear as crystal, reflecting the sharp, blinding flashes of lightning. He hears the deafening, physical rumble of thunder, echoing through the architecture of heaven. And seated around the center are 24 elders. Look at what John says they are wearing on their heads. He uses the Greek phrase Stephanos Chrysis, golden wreaths. This is a deliberate, brilliant paradox. The wreath of the earthly runner was made of dying leaves, but these wreaths are made of pure, imperishable gold. They are wearing the victor's crown, the proof of their agonizing endurance in a broken world. But the material has been transformed into something that cannot decay. The race is over. The pain is gone. The gold rests on their heads. You would expect them to sit and wear it for eternity, but they do not. Whenever the living creatures give glory to the one on the throne, the 24 elders drop to their knees. They take the golden wreaths, the physical proof of their lifetime of faithful endurance, and they hurl them onto the sea of glass. You can almost hear the heavy, metallic ringing of solid gold hitting the crystalline floor, echoing through the massive expanse of the room. In the ancient Roman world, when a foreign king was conquered by the empire, he was brought to the capital as the end of a struggle, a reward. You fight. You win. You get the gold. we assume the thorns pressed into Jesus' head and forced to cast his diadema at Caesar's feet. It was a humiliating display of absolute subjugation. But the elders are not casting a diadema. They are casting their Stephanos. This is not the forced surrender of a conquered enemy. It is the joyous offering of a surviving child. They take the highest honor a human being can receive, the proof that they suffered, the proof that they ran the race, the proof that they bled and did not quit, and they give it back. They look at the one on the throne and realize that every single ounce of strength they used to run the race actually came from him. They could not have crossed the finish line without his breath filling their burning lungs. The crowns are not trophies they get to keep. They are the currency of their worship, to stand in the presence of the absolute. Unfiltered glory of God is to realize that you have nothing of your own to boast about. The only appropriate response to infinite grace is to take the very reward that grace has given you and lay it right back at his feet. The grand narrative of the biblical crown does not end with humanity ruling the cosmos in our own strength. It ends with humanity kneeling on a sea of glass. Our heads bare, our hands entirely empty. We're a twisted irony, a brutal exception to what a crown is actually supposed to be. But that assumes we understand what the biblical authors, and that singular image of empty hands is exactly where the weight of this entire story comes rushing directly into your life today. A priest wore a plate of separated gold and carried the isolation of a broken people. A king demanded a heavy circle of metal, and the monarchy collapsed under its violent weight. A Greek runner pushed his body to the breaking point and received a fading branch of pine. A Roman cohort twisted the curse of the earth into a victor's wreath and accidentally crowned the priest returning to the altar. A savior carried those thorns to a cross and bled to buy back the world. A persecuted church stood firm in the face of death and received an imperishable promise of life. And 24 elders looked at the blinding light of the throne and hurled their golden rewards onto a sea of glass. One symbol, one story. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the sound of that solid gold hitting the glass. The realization that the elders' hands are entirely empty. They do not keep the reward. They do not build tiny thrones to sit on. Thought a crown was in the first place. If you think a crown is about elevating one person above the rest, because they understand that the only reason they have golden wreaths to throw in the first place is because a Galilean was willing to wear the thorns. He took the curse so they could carry the gold. If you are in a season where you are exhausted from trying to hold your life together, where the diadema of control you are trying to wear is suffocating you, take it off. You were never meant to be the monarch of your own existence. You are a runner, and the wreath you are promised is not the power to prevent the pain. It is the presence of the judge, waiting for you at the finish line. And may the God who wore the curse of the earth so that you could wear the crown of life, meet you on your track today and give you the breath you need for the very next step. The thorns will always look like a tragic parody. But if you see what the Hebrew text actually says, the bleeding man, the stone floor is cold, stained with fresh blood and the spit of a laughing garrison. He is not making a weapon. In the Roman courtyard, begins to make a very different kind of sense. He is not the exception to the pattern. He is the climax of it. To understand why the thorns had to happen, you have to go back centuries, before the Roman Empire even existed, long before Israel ever had a throne, a palace, or a monarch. Because the very first crown God commands to be made in the scriptures was not designed for a king at all. Exodus, chapter 39. The artisans are finishing the garments for Aaron, the first high priest of Israel. They forge a plate of pure gold. They engrave it like a signet with the words, "Holy to the Lord," and they tie it to a linen turban with a blue cord. In the English translation of Leviticus, chapter 8, when Moses places this arrangement on his brother's head, the text says he set the holy crown upon him. But the Hebrew word translated here as crown is the word nezer. It is a word that completely upends our political assumptions about gold and power. The noun nezer comes from the Hebrew root verb nazar, which means to dedicate, to consecrate, or to separate. It does not mean to dominate. It does not mean to conquer. It is the exact same root word used in Numbers chapter 6 for for the Nazirite vow. He is making a joke. He presses the woven briar into the scalp of a bruised, exhausted Galilean, driving the spikes deep enough to hit bone. This was the ancient, severe oath taken by men like Samson, who let their hair grow wild, abstained from the fruit of the vine, and refused to touch anything dead as a sign of absolute devotion. Their uncut hair was literally called their nezer. Their separation was their crown. That root changes everything about what that gold plate meant on the forehead of the high priest. When Aaron wore that piece of gold, he was stepping into a role of terrifying isolation. Because of that nezer, he could not leave the sanctuary during his ordination. He could not tear his clothes in grief. He could not even attend the funeral of his own mother or father. The cold metal pressed against his sweating forehead was a constant, physical reminder of the weight he was forced to bear. The scent of burning fat and blood that settled into his clothes was the smell of his daily reality. The first biblical crown is not a symbol of privilege. It is a restriction of freedom. It is a heavy, physical marker, indicating that this human being has been separated from normal life, removed from his own personal desires, and consumed by the burden of representing a broken people before a holy God. He did not rule the people. He carried them. And the nezer was the visible proof of his sacrificial separation. It is the most famous coronation in human history, but it is not an isolated event. The gold was a boundary line, separating the man from himself so he could serve the many. But this original designed the crown as a marker of heavy, priestly sacrifice did not survive the centuries. Eventually, a nation standing in the dust, looking at a priest, decided they wanted something else. They looked at the Philistines and the Ammonites and the Moabites, and they noticed the men in charge of the surrounding nations were wearing a very different kind of metal. They did not want a priest who carried their guilt. They wanted a monarch who would fight their battles. They wanted a king. And when the monarchy begins, the vocabulary of the crown shifts into something profoundly dangerous. Samuel tips the horn. The oil runs down Saul's hair. The people shout. The monarchy begins. But the vocabulary changes. The Hebrew text introduces a second word for crown, atara. It originally meant a simple wreath or a circlet, but in the hands of the kings, it becomes a physical symbol of conquest. It becomes a prize of war. Mount Gilboa burns under a desert sun. The Philistine archers draw their bowstrings. The iron arrows hit. A high priest steps into the dark. Suffocating smoke of the Holy of Holies. The smell of burning incense thick in his lungs. Saul falls on his own sword. The dirt turns red. An Amalekite scavenger runs through the dust, strips the gold atara from the dead king's head, and carries it south to David. David takes it. He wears it. He fights. He expands the borders. He spills so much blood that God forbids him from building the temple. When David conquers the Ammonite city of Rabbah, he takes the crown of their fallen king. The text gives us the exact, terrifying measurement of the object: 1 talent of gold, roughly 75 pounds. They place it on David's head. 75 pounds of solid metal. You cannot fight in it. You cannot run in it. You cannot even turn your neck to look behind you. You can only sit under the crushing, suffocating weight of it. The atara is not a guarantee of divine safety. It is a magnet for violence. Solomon inherits it. He builds the temple. He multiplies the gold. He imports war horses and chariots from Egypt. Then the kingdom tears in half. 10 tribes go north. 2 stay south. Kings rise. Kings fall. Some tear down the pagan altars. Most build them back up. The prophets begin to shout. Isaiah points at the northern kingdom and says, "The proud crown of Ephraim will be trampled underfoot." A pure gold plate tied tight across his sweating forehead. A frantic king watches his jeweled diadem slip from his head. Ezekiel delivers a devastating oracle against the wicked prince of Jerusalem. Speaking for God, remove the turban and take off the crown. Things shall not remain as they are. Exalt that which is low, and bring low that which is exalted. The Assyrians arrive with siege ramps. The Babylonians arrive with torches. The walls fall. The cedar beams burn. The Atara is stripped away. The gold is dragged to Babylon and melted down. The monarchy collapses into the smoking ash of Jerusalem. The kings had demanded the power of the nations, and that same power devoured them. For 400 years, the prophets go silent. The empires shift. The sand covers the ruins. The Persians fall to the Greeks. The Greeks march across the known world, carrying their spears, their philosophy, and their language. And with that new Greek language comes a crucial distinction. They introduce two entirely different words for what goes on ahead. Two words with two completely opposite meanings. And knowing the difference between them is the only way to understand what actually happens when Jesus of Nazareth is dragged before a Roman governor. A scroll of parchment unrolls across the Mediterranean world, carrying a language that splits the concept of power right down the middle, and fall into the blood-soaked dirt of Mount Gilboa. The sound of Philistine arrows cutting through the wind. When the authors of the New Testament sit down to write their accounts, they are writing in Greek. And the Greek language does not just have one word for a crown. It has two. They carry completely different weights. They are one in completely different ways. And the biblical writers never use them interchangeably. The first word is the Greek noun diadema. This is where we get the English word diadem. Originally, it was a smooth, blue silk ribbon tied around the forehead of Persian kings. But by the time of the Caesars, it had become the ultimate marker of autocratic, imperial power. You did not earn a diadema. You inherited it, or you took it by military force. It is the crown of unquestioned political dominance, appearing only 3 times in the entire New Testament, used for the dragon in Revelation chapter 12, the beast in chapter 13, and finally for the conquering, returning Christ in chapter 19. But there is a second word. The word is the Greek noun stephanos. This word comes from the verb stepho, which means to encircle or to twine. A stephanos was not made of gold or jewels. It was a wreath woven out of brittle, fragrant pine branch, wild celery, or olive leaves. It was placed on the head of an athlete who had just crossed the finish line with sweat burning his eyes. An exhausted runner in a Greek stadium bends his neck, his lungs burning, to receive a wreath of brittle pine needles, or placed on a guest of honor sitting at a banquet table. If something about seeing the original language peel back the layers of our modern assumptions is stirring up a hunger to read the text differently, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the New Testament writers make their choice. When they write about the crown of life, the crown of righteousness, or the crown of glory promised to believers, they never use the word diadema. They always, without exception, use the word stephanos. That linguistic choice changes everything about how we understand the promises of God. The stephanos is not a symbol of inherited right. It is the reward for faithful endurance. It is the crown of the runner, not the ruler. It signifies that the wearer has suffered, has agonized, has stayed on the path when every muscle in their body screamed at them to quit, and has finally reached the end. This distinction is the only way to understand what actually happens in the courtyard of Pontius Pilate, because the detail that changes how you read the crucifixion is what kind of crown the Roman soldiers actually wove, that will turn brown in 3 days. And 24 ancient elders stand in a blinding light. Take off crowns of solid, crushing gold. The flagrum falls. The flesh tears. The blood pools on the cold limestone. Pilate washes his hands. The Roman soldiers gather in the courtyard of the Praetorium. It is a full cohort, 600 men. The air in the enclosed space smells like sweat, leather, iron, and fear. They need a robe to mock him. They find a cheap, faded purple cloak. They need a scepter for his hand. They break a hollow reed. They need a crown. They find thorns. Matthew, Mark, and John all record this moment. And they all use the exact same Greek phrase, Stephanos akanthinos, A wreath of thorns. They do not call it a diadema. They twist the brittle branches. They press the long, dark spikes deep into his scalp. The bone resists. The blood flows. They strike him in the head with the reed, driving the thorns further in. The sound of the wood hitting the thorns echoes off the stone walls. They drop to their knees. They laugh. But the joke is entirely on them. Because they are using the victor's wreath, the Stephanos is the crown of the runner, who endures the absolute agony of the race. The soldiers think they are mocking his claim to Rome's throne. They are actually crowning his endurance of the cross. And look at what the wreath is made of. Thorns. Go back to the very beginning. Genesis chapter 3. Humanity rebels. The ground is cursed. The text says the earth will now bring forth thorns and thistles,